They say time humbles everyone. For me, it took 63 years, a career that once defined me, and a sister-in-law who thought she could destroy me in front of 200 wedding guests. What she didn't know that night was that her humiliation of me would become the very moment that rebuilt my life, and ended hers. Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you something. Have you ever sacrificed everything for love, only to be mocked for it later? Because that's exactly how my story begins. My name is Loretta Carter, and I'm 63 years old. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, in a quiet, ivy-covered house on a street that smells of magnolia trees after rain. For 20 years, I was known as one of the best marketing executives in the tech industry. The kind of woman who could turn failing brands into national sensations. I handled multi-million-dollar accounts, managed teams across continents, and built a reputation that came with respect, pressure, and more late nights than I care to count. 6 months ago, all of that ended. Not because I was tired or ready to retire, but because life gave me a truth I couldn't ignore. That morning, I was sitting in my corner office on the 31st floor of Blue Haven Technologies, looking out over the Mississippi River. My assistant had just brought in coffee when my phone rang. It was my husband's doctor. Mrs. Carter, his voice had that careful tone doctors use when they're about to break your world in half. Your husband's test results are back. It's pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words didn't make sense at first. Stage 4. Terminal. Months, not years. I remember the sound of the city fading, the traffic below, the hum of office chatter, until it felt like the only sound in the world was my own heartbeat. That afternoon, I submitted my resignation letter. 20 years of building a name, gone in a single email. I packed my things quietly, ignoring the sympathetic smiles from co-workers who thought I was just taking a sabbatical. My husband, Harold Carter, had been my anchor since I was 21. A retired school principal, kind, disciplined, the kind of man who believed in handwritten notes and evening prayers. When I walked into our home that evening and told him I had quit, he tried to protest. "Loretta, you've worked your whole life for that job," he said softly. "And I'll work the rest of my life for you," I replied. For the next 6 months, my life became a rhythm of hospital visits, medications, and quiet evenings holding Harold's hand. I learned how to clean 4 lines, how to hide my fear behind smiles, and how to make his favorite gumbo even when he could barely eat a spoonful. But while I was learning to live with loss, others were learning to gossip. My sister-in-law, Denise Carter, never wasted an opportunity to remind me of what I'd thrown away. She'd come by the house now and then, always dressed in designer suits, talking too loudly about her latest promotion at Novacor Systems, where she was HR director. Once, as I refilled Harold's water, she leaned against the doorway with a smirk. "So, this is your life now," she said. "From boardrooms to bedpans? Some people just aren't built for the pressure, huh?" Her words cut deep, but I didn't reply. Denise had always been like this, competitive, insecure, obsessed with appearances. She wasn't cruel because I'd done anything wrong. She was cruel because I reminded her of everything she wanted to be: respected, admired, and loved. At night, when Harold was asleep, I'd sit by the window with my laptop open, staring at messages from former colleagues. "Are you okay?" they'd ask. "When are you coming back?" Some meant well. Most were just curious, like people slowing down to stare at a car wreck. But every time Harold squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for being here," I knew I'd made the right choice. I just didn't know yet that my sacrifice, the one Denise mocked, would one day become the reason she'd lose everything. The months that followed were some of the hardest and most revealing of my life. Grief has a way of stripping away the noise, showing you who people truly are, and who they've always been. For me, that truth came in the form of whispered judgments and thinly veiled pity. Denise Carter, my sister-in-law, had mastered the art of making concern sound like condemnation. She'd visit our house once a week, always during her lunch hour, always in a rush. Her perfume would fill the room before she even spoke, her high heels clicking on the hardwood like a countdown to irritation. "How's Harold doing?" she'd ask in that polished HR tone of hers. "I just can't imagine being home all day like this. It must feel stifling." Then she'd glance at my loose cardigan, my tired face, and add, "You know, I've been nominated for the company's Leadership Excellence Award. Our CEO, Nathan Brooks, says I remind him of his early career, ambitious, relentless." She always looked at me then, waiting for jealousy. She never got it. When she left, she'd post photos on social media, captioned with things like, "Family is everything redheart, #grateful, #career goals," selfies with Harold smiling weakly beside her hospital chair. I never said anything. Harold deserved peace, not pettiness. Still, the whispers grew. At family dinners, people treated me like a cautionary tale, a once successful woman who'd lost her spark. My niece pulled me aside once, whispering, "Aunt Loretta, people are saying you had a breakdown. Is that true?" I wanted to laugh, but the truth was heavier than humor. "No, baby," I told her. "I didn't break down. I just slowed down, long enough to remember who I am." Harold's condition worsened that spring. His body was frail, but his mind was clear. On good days, we'd sit on the porch and listen to jazz drifting from a neighbor's radio. He'd rest his hand over mine and say, "Loretta, you spent years building companies. Promise me now you'll build yourself." I didn't know what he meant then, but I would, soon enough. Meanwhile, Denise's ambition bloomed like a weed. She made sure the whole family knew she'd been promoted to senior HR director at Novacor Systems. Her tone grew sharper, her smiles tighter. The more Harold declined, the more she seemed to thrive on telling me how strong she was for balancing work and life. One afternoon, she arrived unannounced, clutching her phone. "You should see this," she said, shoving a LinkedIn post in my face. Her latest update read, "Some women step away when life gets hard. Others rise higher. Leadership is about choices." I looked at the screen, then at her, and simply said, "You're right. It is." That was the first time she looked unsettled, as if my calm unnerved her more than any argument could. But beneath her smug confidence, I could feel something brewing, something darker, more calculated. I just didn't realize how far she'd go to feed her ego until my son's wedding came around. It was Marcus's wedding. My only child, my pride, my heart. He worked as a software engineer at Novacor Systems, the same company where Denise now reigned like a queen. When the wedding invitations went out, Denise offered to help with arrangements. I knew what that meant. She wanted control. She wanted the stage. Harold was too weak to attend, so I promised him I'd record everything. He smiled faintly and said, "Remember, Loretta, quiet strength wins wars no one else sees." I didn't know then, but those words would carry me through the storm that was about to come. Because at that wedding, in front of 200 guests, Denise Carter would finally show the world exactly who she was. And so would I. The morning of Marcus's wedding arrived draped in that strange mixture of joy and heaviness that comes when life feels both beautiful and fragile. My husband Harold was too weak to get out of bed, but his eyes were bright clear, the kind of clarity that always came before one of his good days. "You look beautiful, Loretta," he whispered as I adjusted the string of pearls around my neck, the same ones he'd given me on our 25th anniversary. I smiled and brushed his hand. "You're just saying that because you know I hate wearing heels." He laughed softly, though the effort cost him his breath. "Promise me something," he said after a pause. "Whatever happens today, don't let her get to you. You know she'll try." "She always does," I murmured. But this time, I wasn't walking into the fire unprepared. I kissed him goodbye, promising to FaceTime during the ceremony, and left with my phone fully charged and my composure tightly in place. The drive to Atlanta, Georgia, felt longer than it was, 4 hours of winding roads and steady thoughts. The wedding venue, the Magnolia Estate, stood like something out of a dream. White columns, sprawling gardens, fountains glistening under the noon sun. When I stepped out of the car, the scent of roses mixed with the murmur of laughter. Guests were arriving in silk dresses and tailored suits, clutching champagne flutes and gift bags. Everything shimmered with luxury, the kind of perfection Denise thrived on. And sure enough, there she was, Denise Carter, standing near the entrance like the self-appointed hostess she always fancied herself to be. Her fitted emerald dress sparkled under the light, her diamond bracelet gleamed as she gestured dramatically to a group of vendors. When her eyes found me, her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Loretta, you made it," she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just long enough for everyone to see but not long enough to feel genuine warmth. "I wouldn't miss my son's wedding," I replied. "Oh, of course not," she said, her tone dripping with sweetness and poison all at once. "I just wasn't sure, with everything going on at home." Her meaning was clear. Harold. His illness. My absence from corporate life. My supposed downfall. I let it slide. There would be no satisfaction for her today. Not yet. Inside, the ballroom gleamed with chandeliers and polished wood floors. The soft notes of a jazz trio floated through the air. Marcus looked handsome, nervous, and kind, his father's eyes my smile. When he saw me, he broke into a grin. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug. "You look amazing." He stepped back, glancing around. "Aunt Denise is already talking about you at the registration table." "Talking about me?" I raised an eyebrow. He hesitated, then sighed. "She's been telling some of my co-workers that you left work because you couldn't handle the stress anymore. She's been saying it for months, apparently." I smiled tightly. Let her talk. She's building her own stage, Marcus. She'll fall through it soon enough. He chuckled, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "You're not angry?" "Anger gives her power," I said. "I prefer patience. It stings longer." He laughed at that, the same warm, genuine sound Harold used to make, and kissed my cheek before heading off to meet the photographer. As I stood by the window, watching the guests filter in, I felt my phone buzz. A LinkedIn notification. I almost ignored it until I saw the sender's name, Nathan Brooks, CEO of Novacore Systems, Denise's boss. His message was short, polite, and carried an undertone that made me pause. "Still hoping to have that conversation when you're ready, Loretta. Your insight could change this company's future." I smiled faintly. I hadn't realized Nathan would be attending today, but the idea didn't surprise me. Marcus had mentioned the CEO planned to stop by since he was mentoring several young engineers at Novacore, including my son. That was when I realized, Denise had no idea her boss and I already knew each other. It was an opportunity, one I didn't plan to use yet, but I could feel the story writing itself. Outside, the orchestra shifted to a livelier tune. Guests were laughing, glasses clinking, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. Everything looked perfect. But I've lived long enough to know, perfection is always the calm before the storm. The ceremony began just as the late afternoon light slipped through the tall windows of the Magnolia Estate. Everything about the setting was beautiful, almost painfully so. White roses lined the aisle, soft jazz hummed beneath the quiet chatter of 200 guests, and my son, Marcus Carter, stood at the altar looking like the proudest man alive. For a moment, I forgot about Denise, about the whispers, about everything except the joy on my boy's face. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted my phone, ready to stream the ceremony for Harold, who was watching from his hospital bed back in New Orleans. The music swelled. The guests rose. And for 20 peaceful minutes, everything was perfect. But perfection, as I've learned, has a short shelf life, especially when someone like Denise Carter is nearby. The ceremony ended, the vows were exchanged, and Marcus kissed his bride. The guests erupted in applause. As the reception began, the ballroom filled with laughter, champagne, and clinking silverware. Denise had, of course, taken control of the microphone. She strutted to the stage, her heels clicking like punctuation marks, her expression glowing with the thrill of being the center of attention. "Before we begin dinner," she said into the mic, "I'd like to say a few words." A few words from Denise usually meant a few wounds for someone else. I sat quietly at my table near the back, next to Harold's empty chair, pretending to sip my wine. Marcus was busy greeting guests near the stage, unaware of what was about to unfold. Denise smiled at the crowd. "I'm so proud of my nephew," she began. "He's the reflection of hard work and ambition, qualities that run deep in our family. We Carters are achievers. We don't quit when things get tough. We rise." A few people clapped. My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. She continued, voice dripping with false sweetness. "But of course, every family has that one person who reminds us what happens when we forget to keep pushing forward." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. She turned slightly, looking right at me. "And tonight, I think it's important we recognize those who taught us what not to do." Gasps whispered across the tables. My heart didn't race, it slowed, deliberate, heavy. Denise smiled wider. "I mean, it takes real courage to walk away from a 20-year career just to," she paused, pretending to search for a polite word, "tend to household duties. Not all women are built for pressure, and that's okay." The crowd tittered awkwardly. Some looked at me, others avoided eye contact. Marcus froze near the stage, confusion etched on his face. "And yet," she continued, her voice rising with smug confidence, "here I am, proud to say I've just been promoted to Senior HR Director at Novacore Systems. Our CEO, Mr. Nathan Brooks, even said I remind him of his younger self, ambitious, unstoppable, dedicated to excellence." That was when I saw him, Nathan Brooks, sitting just a few tables away, his expression calm but unreadable. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was watching. Denise laughed lightly, oblivious to the shifting air around her. "Some women spend their golden years baking pies," she added with a faux laugh, "others make real impact." The sting of humiliation brushed against my skin, but I didn't flinch. I looked down at Harold's photo on my phone screen, his tired but steady smile, and I remembered his words, "Don't let her get to you." So I didn't. I sat still, every muscle relaxed, every heartbeat controlled. But across the room, Nathan Brooks was already standing. "Miss Carter," his deep voice carried easily through the microphone as he stepped toward the stage. The room went silent. Denise blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, Mr. Brooks. I didn't see you." "I can tell," he interrupted smoothly, his tone calm but edged with authority. "Since you mentioned me by name, I think it's only fair I say something too." She froze. Her smile faltered for the first time that evening. Nathan took the microphone from her hand and turned toward the guests. "You see, Miss Carter here works for my company, Novacore Systems. But what most of you don't know is that a few months ago, I tried to hire another Miss Carter. Someone who built Blue Haven Technologies from a struggling startup into a multimillion-dollar firm." He turned slightly, meeting my eyes. "That woman is sitting right there, Loretta Carter." A hush fell over the ballroom. All eyes turned toward me. "Loretta declined my offer," Nathan continued, "because she chose to care for her husband, a man who's devoted his life to education and community. That, my friends, is what real leadership looks like. Not titles. Not promotions. Integrity." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, the kind that swallows pride whole. Denise's face drained of color. Her hand trembled as she tried to take the microphone back, but Nathan didn't let her. He turned once more to the guests. So, if anyone here was confused about which Carter deserves respect tonight, I hope I've cleared that up. Applause broke out slowly, hesitant at first, then thunderous. People rose from their chairs. My son, Marcus, hurried across the room and wrapped me in his arms. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," he whispered. I smiled, still calm, still steady. "Your father would be proud too," I said. As for Denise, she stood frozen beside the stage, surrounded by the applause meant for the woman she had just tried to humiliate. And in that moment I knew, her fall had only just begun. The applause in the ballroom eventually softened, but the tension it left behind clung to the air like static. I could feel every pair of eyes shift toward Denise Carter, whose forced smile trembled at the edges. The confidence that had carried her onto that stage moments ago was now cracking, piece by piece, under the weight of silence and shame. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. "Mr. Brooks," she stammered finally, her voice dry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was only..." Nathan raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "You were only embarrassing someone who gave up her career for love, in front of 200 people. That's not a misunderstanding, Miss Carter, that's a choice." A low murmur rippled through the guests. Denise's face flushed crimson, then pale. The room that once applauded her ambition now stared at her with quiet judgment. Nathan handed the microphone to an assistant and turned toward her with calm precision. "We'll discuss this further on Monday," he said. "But for now, enjoy the evening. You've earned the attention you wanted." And with that, he walked away, leaving her frozen under the stage lights. I didn't gloat. I didn't even move. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling something between relief and disbelief. Not satisfaction, not yet, but the quiet beginning of justice. Marcus returned to my side, his voice low. "Mom, that was incredible. You didn't even have to say a word." I smiled faintly. "Some truths don't need words, baby. They just need time." Across the room, Denise tried to collect herself, brushing at her hair, forcing a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. She reached for her champagne glass, her hand shaking slightly, then made a hasty exit toward the hallway. The rest of the night carried on. The band resumed playing, guests began to dance again, and the noise of celebration slowly filled the cracks her arrogance had left. But her absence was noticeable, like a stain everyone could see but no one mentioned. As I sat there, watching Marcus dance with his new bride, my phone buzzed quietly on the table. A new message, from Nathan Brooks. "Miss Carter, I apologize for what happened tonight. I had no idea your family connection to Denise. I meant every word I said, and my offer still stands, if you ever decide to return to consulting." I looked at the message for a long moment, then at my son, and finally at the empty chair beside me, Harold's chair. My husband had been right all along. Quiet strength wins wars no one else sees. The rest of the evening blurred into soft laughter and music. Guests stopped by my table to whisper their admiration. "Miss Carter, that was something else. You handled it with such grace. You didn't even flinch." And I didn't. Because I'd already been through something far worse, watching the love of my life fade a little more every day. Denise's humiliation was nothing compared to that kind of loss. But she didn't know that. She didn't know that what she'd done tonight had set off a chain reaction, one that would reach far beyond this ballroom. When the wedding finally ended, I walked outside into the cool night air. The moon hung low over Atlanta, silver light rippling across the marble steps. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills you with peace after holding it too long. Just as I reached my car, I saw Denise standing alone near the parking lot. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly undone, the picture of a woman whose pride had been peeled away layer by layer. "Loretta," she called, her voice trembling. I turned slowly. "Denise." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was just trying to make a point." "You made one," I said quietly. "Just not the one you intended." Her eyes glistened. "Nathan will never forgive me for that speech. I've worked my whole life to get where I am, and now." I stepped closer. "Now you know what it feels like to lose something you built. Maybe next time you'll think twice before tearing someone else down." For a moment, her face softened, not out of remorse but fear. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking unevenly across the pavement. I stood there a while longer, watching the taillights disappear into the night. Then I looked up at the sky and whispered, "You were right, Harold. Justice always finds its way." I didn't know it yet, but this night was only the beginning. By Monday morning, what had happened at the Magnolia estate would spread across the company, through offices, group chats, and board meetings. Denise Carter wasn't just going to lose her reputation. She was going to lose everything. Monday morning came quietly, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. I was sitting at my kitchen table in New Orleans, a mug of black coffee cooling beside my laptop, when the first call came in. It was Marcus. His voice carried the cautious tone of someone delivering news they weren't sure I wanted to hear. "Mom, something's happening at Novacor." I smiled faintly. "Let me guess, your Aunt Denise?" He hesitated. "It's everywhere. There's a video." I opened my email, and there it was, the subject line every corporate professional dreads. HR director publicly insults former executive during family event. CEO responds. Someone at the wedding had recorded the entire confrontation. The video was now viral on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Nathan Brooks' calm defense of my decision, and the moment he fired back at Denise's cruelty, had been clipped, captioned, and shared across every professional platform imaginable. #family overtitles, #leadership with heart, #Loretta Carter. Those hashtags were trending globally by noon. In the video, Denise looked exactly as she had that night, smug, condescending, and then terrified when she realized who was standing behind her. The internet loved it. One headline read, "CEO publicly shuts down his own HR director, a masterclass in compassionate leadership." Another simply said, "She called her sister-in-law a failure. Turns out, the failure built her boss's company." By mid-morning, Denise's social media accounts were locked, her LinkedIn wiped clean, and Novacor had released a public statement. Effective immediately, Denise Carter has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Novacor is committed to fostering a culture of empathy, respect, and accountability. We do not tolerate behavior inconsistent with those values. Marcus texted me a link to the statement with a single line. "You didn't even have to lift a finger." I chuckled softly, though there was a part of me that pitied her. Denise had built her entire identity around status and perception. To lose that publicly, it would crush her. But compassion doesn't erase consequences. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was Nathan Brooks himself. "Loretta," he began, his tone both formal and warm. "I owe you an update." "I think I've seen it," I said, glancing at the flood of notifications on my screen. He chuckled. "Yes, I imagine you have. It seems the world loves a redemption story, and you, Miss Carter, are the heart of this one." "I didn't want a spectacle," I replied. "Just peace." "I know," he said. "But sometimes, life gives us a platform even when we didn't ask for it. I meant what I said at the wedding, that offer still stands. But after what I saw this weekend, I think you should consider something else." "Something else?" I asked. He paused. "Consulting. Coaching. Leadership development. The way you handled that situation, the grace you showed, that's the kind of guidance the corporate world needs. His words lingered long after the call ended. I sat in silence, staring at the framed photo of Harold on the counter. His kind eyes, his calm strength. He would have told me to go for it. That evening, as the sun dipped over the bayou, I drafted the first page of something new, a proposal titled, Carter Consulting Group, Building Compassionate Corporate Cultures. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if I was ready. But I knew one thing for certain. Denise had tried to destroy my reputation, and in doing so, she'd handed me the foundation for my next success. By the end of the week, Novacor had formally terminated her contract. The company's official memo stated that she'd violated professional ethics and created a hostile environment inconsistent with organizational standards. Nathan forwarded me a copy. "Thought you should have this for your records," he wrote. "We're moving forward with a partnership proposal, if you're open to it." I smiled as I read it, then turned to Harold, who was resting in his chair, his blanket tucked under his chin. "It's starting again, love," I whispered. "Only this time on my terms." He opened his eyes, weak but bright. "Good," he murmured. "Make them remember your name." And I would. By the end of that same month, the idea Nathan had planted in my mind had taken root. What started as a passing thought, Carter Consulting Group, soon became my new mission. Harold's condition was stable enough that I could work from home, and Marcus helped me set up a small workspace in our dining room. It wasn't fancy, just a sturdy oak table, a laptop, and a notebook filled with ideas. But it was mine. I registered the business officially under Carter Consulting Group LLC, focused on compassionate leadership and ethical corporate transformation. The mission statement read, "Helping companies rediscover humanity without losing profitability." It sounded bold, maybe even naive. But after everything I'd seen in corporate America, the burnout, the cold metrics, the endless race for promotions, I knew there was room for change. 2 weeks later, Nathan Brooks reached out again. "Loretta, I've got an idea," he said. "Novacor needs a full cultural reset. I want your firm to lead it." I almost laughed. "You want me to fix the mess your HR director made?" He chuckled. "Exactly. You understand empathy, boundaries, and accountability. That's what our company's been missing. And I trust you." He offered a $1.5 million, year-long consulting contract, renewable annually. I accepted, under 3 non-negotiable conditions. Remote work only. I refused to be away from Harold. Flexible hours, mornings for meetings, afternoons for caregiving. Policy reforms. Novacor must adopt caregiving leave, mental health days, and parental flexibility for all employees. Nathan didn't hesitate. "Done," he said. And just like that, Carter Consulting had its first major client. Within the next month, the story of my return, the woman who redefined leadership, spread across business networks. Forbes Women in Leadership published an interview titled, "From Career Sacrifice to Cultural Revolution, How Loretta Carter is Changing Corporate America." The requests started pouring in. Companies from Dallas, Charlotte, Seattle, and Chicago, all wanting to humanize their leadership models. I couldn't take them all, so I began hiring. Carefully. My first recruits were professionals who'd once been written off, a single mother laid off for missing work to care for her sick child, a veteran HR specialist pushed out after taking medical leave, a marketing director in her 50s told she was too old to innovate. We built our remote team of 6, all women, all fighters, all ready to reshape the system that once rejected them. Every day began the same way: coffee with Harold, morning team huddles, strategy sessions with executives who didn't yet understand empathy. And every day ended with Harold's quiet smile as he listened to me talk about contracts, milestones, and new beginnings. Seems like you're back on top, he'd tease, his voice soft but proud. I'm not on top, I'd reply. I'm exactly where I belong. 3 months later, Novacore's employee satisfaction numbers were up by 63%, turnover dropped by half, and productivity hit record highs. Nathan emailed me late one night. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Denise's absence was a loss, but your influence became our turning point. I smiled at that. Denise's absence wasn't a loss. It was a necessary vacancy. But karma, as always, had its own timing, and Denise wasn't done crossing paths with me just yet. Because 2 weeks later, I received an email from a familiar address, denise.carter@harperandgray.com, subject line, professional opportunity. I opened it slowly, already sensing where this story was heading. When I saw Denise's name in my inbox, my first instinct was to delete the message without opening it. For months, I'd trained myself to let go of the bitterness she'd planted in my life, to move forward without looking back. But something about that subject line, professional opportunity, made me pause. Denise never reached out unless she needed something. And people like her didn't change overnight. I clicked. From Denise Carter, denise.carter@harperandgray.com to Loretta Carter, contact@carterconsultinggroup.com, subject, professional opportunity. Loretta. I realize this email might surprise you, but I'll get straight to the point. I've started working at Harper & Gray, a mid-sized technology firm in Atlanta. We're struggling with employee morale, internal turnover, and reputation recovery after a leadership scandal last quarter. The CEO has been following your work with Novacore. He's impressed by the transformation you led there, your family-first policy framework, especially. He asked if I could reach out to see if Carter Consulting would consider working with us. I know we have a difficult history, and I understand if you decline. But professionally speaking, I believe you're exactly what this company needs. Denise. I read it twice. Then a third time. It was polite. Careful. Almost humble, but not quite. I could sense the tremor beneath her words, the forced professionalism of someone trying to rebuild what they'd destroyed. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. Well, Harold, I said aloud, glancing toward his chair. Looks like life really does come full circle. He smiled faintly, his voice weak but steady. So, what are you going to do? I haven't decided, I said. Part of me wants to ignore her completely. Another part of me wants to see how far she's willing to go. He chuckled softly. You've never been one for revenge, Loretta. You've always been for lessons. He was right. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I used to be. I had rebuilt myself from the ashes she left behind. And maybe now, this was my chance to teach her the very lesson she refused to learn before. That power without empathy is hollow. I responded the next morning. From Loretta Carter to Denise Carter. Denise. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your message and the professionalism in your approach. Carter Consulting would be open to discussing a partnership with Harper & Gray, provided our terms are respected. Please send me the company's core value statement and recent HR compliance reports before we proceed. Loretta. No warmth. No resentment. Just boundaries. An hour later, her reply came, shorter this time, clipped but compliant. Absolutely. I'll have the files sent within the hour. Thank you, Loretta. Truly. For the next few days, we communicated strictly on business terms. Contracts, scopes, timelines, everything through email or her assistant. She was courteous, even deferential. If her pride had been a fortress once, it was now dust on the floor. By the time the contract was finalized, Carter Consulting had secured another multimillion-dollar deal. Harper & Gray became our fourth corporate client, and Denise, ironically, was our direct point of contact. On the morning of the kickoff meeting, I logged into the virtual call early. My camera was on, professional smile ready. One by one, the attendees joined, the CEO, the HR manager, a few department heads. Then, finally, Denise. She froze when she saw me. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she managed a nervous smile. "Good morning, Miss Carter," she said, voice steady but her eyes gave her away. "It's nice to see you again." "Good morning, Miss Carter," I replied evenly. "Let's make sure this time, we both understand what leadership really means." Her lips parted slightly, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but I didn't give her the chance. I began the presentation, my slides appearing crisp on the screen. Carter Consulting's first initiative, I began, is to rebuild Harper & Gray's internal culture, with emphasis on accountability, emotional intelligence, and ethical leadership. These are non-negotiable values for us. Any executive unwilling to uphold them will be advised to step down. The silence that followed was deep, the kind that vibrates between truth and discomfort. Denise's face paled, but she nodded. Understood. When the call ended, my assistant messaged me privately. "Was that your sister-in-law?" She looked terrified. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I typed back. "But this isn't about fear anymore. It's about correction." That evening, as I sat beside Harold watching the sunset through our porch window, he reached for my hand. "You did the right thing, Loretta," he said softly. "You didn't punish her. You gave her a chance to rise." I nodded, eyes glistening. Maybe this time, she'll take it. But I had no idea how much further this cycle of redemption, or reckoning, would go. Because in the months that followed, Harper & Gray's transformation would shake Denise's world once again. And this time, it wouldn't end quietly. When I accepted Harper & Gray's contract, I told myself I was doing it for the company, not for Denise. I convinced myself it was just business, that I was a professional doing her job. But deep down, I knew this assignment was personal. It wasn't revenge I wanted anymore. It was truth, for Denise to see the world through the lens she'd once used to belittle others. The first few weeks went smoothly. My consulting team conducted assessments, employee interviews, and leadership workshops. Harper & Gray was a mess of rigid hierarchies and unspoken resentment. Their performance numbers were strong, but their culture was fractured, a familiar story. Denise attended every session. She sat quietly in the front row, taking notes like a student afraid to make noise. It was strange to see her that way, the woman who once strutted through boardrooms now subdued, humbled. Still, I could sense the struggle inside her. Pride dies slowly, even when it's cornered by consequence. One afternoon during a leadership development seminar, I opened with a personal story, not to shame but to teach. "Years ago," I said, standing before a group of executives, "I watched someone close to me lose everything because they confused ambition with integrity. They believed success meant stepping on others. But true leadership isn't about climbing higher, it's about lifting others up." My eyes flicked toward Denise for a fraction of a second. She was staring down at her notepad, but her shoulders had stiffened. The lesson had found its mark. After the session, she approached me slowly, her expression fragile, stripped of the armor she used to wear. "Loretta," she said softly, "can I speak with you, privately?" I nodded and led her into the hallway, away from the others. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I know I don't deserve your time, or your forgiveness. But I need to say this. I was wrong." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I thought my job title made me better," she said, voice trembling. "When I saw you walk away from your career, I thought you were weak. But watching what you built, how people look at you now, I see it wasn't weakness. It was strength I didn't understand." Her eyes glistened with tears she was fighting to hold back. I ruined my career because I couldn't handle your grace. I was jealous of the respect you earned without demanding it. I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Denise, I said quietly, you hurt me deeply. You humiliated me in front of my family and my colleagues. But what destroyed you wasn't me. It was your fear, the fear of not being enough. She nodded slowly. You're right. And I've been trying to change. This job. It's my last chance. I want to make it right. Her vulnerability disarmed me. For a brief second, I saw not the woman who tried to tear me down, but a lost soul trying to rebuild herself from the rubble of her own mistakes. Then make it right, I said simply. Not for me. For yourself. For the people you lead. She swallowed hard and nodded. I will. Over the next several months, Denise did something I never expected. She transformed. She listened during our coaching sessions, supported her staff instead of competing with them, and even started a mentorship program for young women trying to balance family and career. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing recognition. She was earning respect. Harper & Gray's culture shifted faster than I'd imagined. Employees reported record-high morale and collaboration. Productivity soared. The board took notice, and so did the press. A year after our contract began, Forbes Women published an article titled, From Rivalry to Reform, How Two Carters Rebuilt a Company and Redefined Leadership. When I read the piece, I smiled faintly. I hadn't agreed to the interview, but the story was accurate. Denise had changed, and her work proved it. One evening, I received a handwritten letter in the mail, from her. Loretta, I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope I've earned a little of your respect. You were the mirror I needed, the reminder that titles fade but character lasts. I'm grateful you didn't shut the door when you had every right to. Because of you, I'm finally proud of the woman I've become. Denise. I read it twice, tears welling in my eyes. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the same drawer where I kept Harold's wedding band and my first business contract, symbols of the lives I'd built and rebuilt. That night, as Harold slept beside me, I whispered, she finally learned love. Maybe we both did. He stirred slightly, his hand finding mine in the dark. You taught her, Loretta, he murmured. The way you always teach, by example. And for the first time in years, my heart felt light. But life, as I've learned, never pauses at redemption. It always has one more test waiting, one that challenges what we claim to have forgiven. And mine was coming sooner than I thought. The following spring, the air in New Orleans turned soft and golden, and the garden Harold loved so much began to bloom again. Life had found a rhythm, quiet, stable, almost peaceful. Harold's health had declined, but his spirit hadn't. He still teased me about overworking, still smiled when I told him about my clients' successes, still said, Loretta, you've turned your pain into purpose. Carter Consulting had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. 6 full-time consultants, 9 part-timers, and a waiting list of corporate clients stretching halfway through next year. Business Journal South had just named us one of the 10 most innovative leadership firms in America. Yet, even with all that success, my favorite part of every day was the same. Sitting beside Harold as the sun set over the bayou, holding his hand, knowing that I'd kept my promise, I'd never let my work steal the time I owed to love. One Thursday afternoon, just after finishing a strategy call, I received a message from Nathan Brooks. Loretta, Harper & Gray's board has requested a joint keynote for our upcoming leadership summit in Dallas. They want both you and Denise to speak, together. I think it could be powerful. Are you open to it? I stared at the message for a long moment. It wasn't that I didn't want to do it, but I wasn't sure how I felt about standing beside Denise on a stage again. We'd rebuilt something resembling respect, but history has a way of echoing in the strangest moments. That night, I told Harold. He smiled faintly. You have to go. Not for her, for you. It's your final chapter with her, Loretta. End it the way only you can, with grace. He was right. 3 weeks later, I stood backstage at the Dallas Leadership Summit, adjusting my microphone and scanning the sea of faces beyond the curtains. Executives, entrepreneurs, journalists, over 1,000 people gathered to hear about empathy in leadership. Denise was beside me, wearing a navy suit and a quiet expression. There was no arrogance left in her, no desperate need for attention. Just calm respect. She turned to me and whispered, "Thank you for giving me this chance." I nodded. You earned it. The announcer's voice boomed, "Please welcome our keynote speakers, Ms. Loretta Carter, founder of Carter Consulting Group, and Ms. Denise Carter, Vice President of Harper & Gray." The applause was loud, bright, and warm. We walked onto the stage together, two women who had once stood on opposite sides of humiliation, now side by side in understanding. I began. When I left corporate life 5 years ago, I thought my career was over. I walked away to care for my husband, who was battling cancer. Many said it was career suicide. But love doesn't ruin you, it reveals you. It shows you what truly matters. The audience listened in silence. Denise glanced at me, her eyes shining. I continued, leadership isn't about control. It's about connection. About knowing when to speak, and when to listen. The most powerful leaders I've met aren't the loudest in the room, they're the ones who see others clearly. Then Denise spoke. I used to think leadership meant being the smartest, the most ambitious, the most admired, she said. But I learned that without compassion, ambition becomes cruelty. I learned that from my sister-in-law. The crowd murmured softly. Denise smiled at me, tears glistening. She didn't destroy me when she could have. She showed me what redemption looked like. And that changed everything. The room rose into applause, not polite, not corporate but real. After the keynote, people swarmed the stage. Journalists, executives, HR directors. Everyone wanted to talk about the Carter model of leadership. They called it revolutionary, balancing excellence with empathy. That evening, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Denise turned to me and said quietly, "I know we can't ever go back, Loretta. But I hope someday we can sit at the same table again, not as enemies but as family." I studied her for a moment, then nodded. Maybe someday. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was peace. A week later, Harold passed away quietly in his sleep. There was no pain, just calm, like the final note of a hymn. I held his hand until the nurses came, whispering through my tears, "You can rest now, love." I kept my promise. At his funeral, Denise came, not dressed in luxury, but in a simple black dress, carrying a small white rose. She stood at the back, silent, respectful. After the service, she approached me. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "He was proud of you, Loretta." Everyone was. I nodded. He believed in redemption, even when I didn't. For the first time in years, I saw sincerity in her eyes. Not guilt. Not fear. Just truth. In the months that followed, life slowed. I traveled less, worked only with select clients, and began mentoring young women entering leadership. I called it the Carter Initiative, a scholarship program for women choosing both family and ambition. One evening, I received a note from Denise. "Harper & Gray just implemented our joint caregiving policy company-wide. Over 1,200 employees now have flexible schedules and parental leave. Thank you for helping me make this possible." I smiled as I read it, feeling Harold's presence somewhere near. Sometimes life teaches us through loss. Sometimes through pain. But every once in a while, it teaches us through forgiveness, not for others but for ourselves. That was my final lesson. Not in business, not in family, but in humanity. And if you've stayed with me through this story, remember this. You don't need to win every battle to come out victorious. Sometimes, just surviving with your grace intact is the greatest victory of all. It's been 5 years since that day in Dallas. The day the world finally heard the story of two women who learned, in the hardest way possible, what leadership, love, and redemption truly mean. So much has changed, yet some things remain beautifully constant. The magnolia tree in our backyard still blooms every spring, the same one Harold planted on our 20th anniversary. When the breeze carries its scent through the open window, it reminds me of him, his patience, his laughter, and the quiet faith he left behind in me. After his passing, I thought I'd slow down, maybe retire, maybe write that memoir Harold always joked I'd one day publish. But life, it seems, had other plans. Carter Consulting Group grew faster than I could have ever imagined. What started as one woman working from her dining table became a national firm with over 50 employees, representing clients from coast to coast. We built a model that redefined the way corporations viewed compassion, not as weakness, but as the foundation of strength. Every policy we implemented, every seminar we conducted, was built around the same truth. You can't build lasting success on broken people. I've seen CEOs cry during coaching sessions, managers admit mistakes they once buried, and employees stand up for themselves for the first time in their careers. These weren't numbers or performance metrics. These were lives changing, the kind of transformation no spreadsheet can measure. And somewhere in that quiet revolution, Denise found her redemption too. After years of silence between us, one morning last Christmas, I received a small box in the mail. Inside was a silver bracelet, engraved with 6 simple words. "Thank you for seeing me anyway." It was signed, "With love, Denise." That single line said everything that needed to be said. I didn't write back, but I placed the bracelet beside Harold's wedding ring, the 2 symbols of forgiveness I'd learned to carry without bitterness. Now, every spring, I visit Harold's grave with fresh magnolias. I sit by his headstone, talk to him about the firm, about Marcus and his wife, who just welcomed their first child, my grandson, Harold Jr. "Can you believe it?" I whisper, tracing his name in the stone. "Your namesake has your eyes." And he already knows how to charm the nurses at daycare. Sometimes, the breeze feels like an answer, gentle, approving, full of peace. Marcus tells me I should slow down, maybe move closer to him in Charlotte, but I always laugh and tell him the same thing. "Baby, I've spent a lifetime running after approval. These days, I just walk with purpose." In the evenings, when the sun sinks behind the cypress trees and my office grows quiet, I look around at the framed photos. Harold smiling at his retirement dinner, Marcus on his wedding day, my consulting team gathered around a laptop, laughing during a late-night Zoom. Every image tells a story, not of power or position, but of people who chose love over fear, purpose over pride. That's my legacy. And if there's one thing I've learned in these 65 years, it's this: you don't have to raise your voice to make history. Sometimes the quietest strength, the choice to stay kind, to stay human, changes more than ambition ever could. I still get messages from women who watched my story online. They write things like, "Your story gave me courage to walk away from a toxic job. You made me believe that motherhood and leadership can coexist. I chose my family, and I don't regret it." Every time I read one, I smile and whisper the same words Harold once said to me: "Make them remember your name." So here I am, Loretta Carter, 65 years old, a widow, a mother, a grandmother, a consultant, and a survivor. And if you're still listening, wherever you are, whatever you're facing, remember this: the people who try to bury you don't realize you're a seed. The ones who humiliate you may one day work beside you. And the love you give, even when it costs you everything, always finds its way back, in time, in peace, and in legacy. That's my story. And if it finds you when you need it most, then maybe, just maybe, it was never really mine alone.